Hey, good afternoon, human experience students. Um, Apologies I can't be with you this afternoon. Very much looking forward to seeing you this time next week. Um, in terms of thinking about the idea of modern violence, I said before the activity week that I wanted us to think about and have a look at Cambodia as a case study. And what I've done is put out quite a lot of materials on Moodle, which includes some slides taken from a couple of the heritage sites in Cambodia, which focus on the genocide narrative there. Um, I'm giving you a few additional articles as well, just in case you're not familiar um, with the historic narrative that takes place in Cambodia with the emergence of the Khmer Rouge in the 1970s. I think it's a fascinating case study to explore in terms of this idea of violence. Very much so because it becomes such an endemic part of the dictatorship, the process of repression that we see in Cambodia. And that in particular is why I focus on the Tuol Sleng genocide prison site. There are all sorts of things that should be quite unsettling about that particular prison. The very fact that it was originally a school is striking and symbolic on a number of different levels. But what happens within that prison? The sheer scale of torture, the sheer loss of life is symbolic of that which is happening across all of Cambodia during this time. For us, it's the very fact that many of the perpetrators of the crimes in those prisons, many of those who are acting as prison guards, many of those who are conducting the torture, were children themselves. These were young humans who were indoctrinated into a particular violent, repressive, and aggressive ideology. And it has a profound impact on their psychology. There was a strong reputation that those children who were prison guards at Tuol Sleng were known for and associated with extreme violence and brutality. So, if we think of that in the context of this module of the human experience, some of the questions that I've tried to pose at the end of the session on Moodle really start probing what happened at Tuol Sleng, what does what happened in Cambodia tell us about humanity? I think one of the darker questions I posed to you at the end of this session is what is more representative of human nature? Is it embracing love the way we did in the first 4 weeks, or is it embracing violence? Is the very fact that those children who were corrupted, or at least we think, or like to believe, were corrupted into perpetrating extreme violence and torture and execution. Is that the true nature of humanity? Or is that something that we create and stimulate? Is it artificial or a true reflection on who we really are? It's not an easy question to pose, but when you start looking through some of the detail of what happens in Cambodia, it's a difficult sentiment to escape, certainly so I believe. Have a look through the materials. It is difficult. One of the more striking images that I've included is that of a mother with a newborn child. And that first image that you can see, these are people who are imprisoned. They were imprisoned as traitors to the regime. When you do a little bit of reading, you'll get a very clear appreciation that mother and child would not have survived that prison site. You'll also get the appreciation that that newborn infant baby will have been treated as a traitor, as a potential enemy and threat to the stability of the leadership of Khmer Rouge. What compels humans to walk this path? What compels humans to identify newborn children as enemies, as something to be feared? Appreciate as well that within their Khmer Rouge ascendancy, just the very notion of family was being stripped away and eroded. Um, all sorts of familiar structures of society were being rejected and replaced, but within that rejection, the model of family was being broken apart as well. So, in a very practical, literal sense, families were being split apart and spread across the country. So, husbands and wives, parents and children, those units were being quite systematically broken up. But of course, some children are going with their parents into prisons like false slave. Appreciate as well that when it comes to themes of commemoration in Cambodia, there are countless unclaimed graves, countless unclaimed human remains, simply because entire families were being wiped out, were being executed. But always come back to that question of how does this reflect on humanity? Not just that it was allowed to happen in a global context and allowed to happen for so long. I mean, there are reasons for that. In terms of information coming out of Cambodia, there was a slow trickle. There were very few people who escaped Cambodia, very few people who were able to share the narrative of what was happening in that country. But on a more profound level, how is it that humans could commit these crimes, commit these atrocities? That's I think, the quite profound question that I think we need to focus on once you've had a look through this material. And hopefully that should stimulate some quite useful but quite challenging discussion material for you. When I see you next week, right, we will continue the Cambodia narrative, because one of the things that we're thinking about in terms of contemporary violence is how we consume violence as a culture, as a society. We have this greedy pleasure almost in violence. And in Cambodia, there is an annual commemoration, a historical reenactment, if you like, of the massacres that take place in close proximity to some of the killing fields. Now, that's very difficult to understand, but we'll have a look at it. We'll look at some videos of that next week. So have a look through the material, have a think about what's happening in Cambodia, and the key question, how does what happened at that prison reflect on humanity? And on that, I'll leave you and we'll pick it up next week. It won't necessarily be lighter or happier material next week, but it will be interesting. I'll guarantee you that. See you then.